The airport terminal was buzzing with movement. Rolling suitcases hummed across shiny floors. Boarding announcements echoed overhead. People rushed past each other with tired faces and busy minds. Among them walked a man who looked surprisingly simple for someone whose name was known around the world, Bruce Lee. He wore a plain jacket, dark trousers, and carried only a small travel bag. No sunglasses, no flashy accessories, just calm eyes and quiet confidence. To most people, he looked like an ordinary traveler catching a long, international flight. Bruce stepped onto the plane with his assistant beside him. The cabin glowed softly under warm lights. First-class passengers settled into wide leather seats, sipping drinks and scrolling through their phones. The atmosphere was relaxed, peaceful. Comfortable. Bruce stopped at his assigned seat near the window. He placed his bag down carefully and smiled politely. At the flight attendant standing nearby, she glanced at his boarding pass. Then she paused, her smile slowly faded. She looked at Bruce again, head to toe, then back at the ticket in her hand. Her eyebrows tightened. "Sir," she said quietly, "I don't think this seat is meant for you." Bruce tilted his head slightly, still calm. "I'm sorry?" he asked gently. The attendant lowered her voice, glancing around as if trying not to draw attention. "This section is first class," she said. "There might be a mix-up. Let me check." Nearby passengers began to notice. A businessman leaned slightly into the aisle. A woman across the cabin paused her conversation. Soft whispers started drifting through the air. Bruce remained still, his posture relaxed, his expression unchanged. He slowly took out his boarding pass and handed it to her again. "This is the seat that was assigned to me," he said calmly. She hesitated, then scanned the ticket once more, her lips pressed together for a brief second. The cabin felt unusually quiet. Eyes were watching. Phone subtly lifted. No one said a word. Bruce simply stood there, calm, patient, respectful. But in that quiet moment, something had shifted, because what began as a simple seat question was about to turn into a moment that would change the entire flight, and what Bruce chose to do next would leave every passenger on that plane completely stunned. The flight attendant took Bruce's boarding pass and walked a few steps down the aisle. She scanned it again, slower this time, her expression tightening as if she was searching for a mistake that wasn't there. Bruce waited quietly. Around him, the calm luxury of first class suddenly felt different. The soft lighting, the quiet music, the comfortable seats, all of it seemed to pause in anticipation. A few passengers leaned forward, pretending to check their phones while secretly watching what was happening. The attendant returned. She didn't smile this time. "Sir," she said carefully, "are you sure you're in the right section? First class is very limited, and sometimes people accidentally sit in the wrong area." Bruce met her eyes. "Yes," he replied softly. "This is the seat printed on my boarding pass." He handed her the ticket again. She glanced at it, and still didn't move. A man 2 rows behind him whispered something to his wife. A quiet chuckle followed. Someone on the other side of the aisle raised their phone just a little higher. The air was no longer relaxed. It was uncomfortable. The attendant shifted her weight and lowered her voice. "Would you mind stepping aside for a moment while I confirm this?" she asked. Bruce looked at the empty aisle beside him. He could feel the unspoken pressure, the polite push to quietly disappear so the cabin could return to normal, but he didn't step aside. He stood where he was. "I don't mind waiting," he said calmly, "but I will wait here." The attendant hesitated. Her fingers tightened around the boarding pass. Whispers spread quietly. Some passengers looked curious. Some looked entertained. A few looked annoyed, as if his presence was interrupting their peaceful flight. Bruce remained motionless, not angry, not defensive, just steady. His assistant leaned closer and whispered, "We can change seats later if needed." Bruce gave a gentle nod but didn't move. At that moment, something important happened. A young passenger across the aisle slowly lifted his phone and began recording. Then another. Then another. The story was no longer private. It was becoming public. Bruce could feel the attention, dozens of eyes, dozens of opinions, yet his breathing stayed slow. His posture remained calm. He wasn't trying to make a scene. He was simply refusing to be quietly misplaced. The attendant stepped back again. Clearly uncertain. The cabin buzzed with quiet tension, and that's when the mood of the flight truly changed, because this was no longer just about a seat. It was about dignity. It was about being seen. And it was about whether calm strength could stand its ground in a room full of silent judgment. Which country or city are you watching this from? Drop it in the comments. This story feels different depending where you live. Asterisk. The flight attendant took a slow breath, then spoke again, this time louder. Sir, I really need you to step into the aisle. Her voice was still polite, but something had changed. It wasn't a request anymore. It was pressure. Several heads turned instantly. Conversations faded. Even the soft background music seemed quieter. Bruce felt every eye on him. His assistant gently touched his arm. Let's not make this complicated, he whispered. We can move. Bruce looked down at his hand, then slowly looked up again. No, he said quietly, not loud, not sharp. Just calm. I will stay right here. A faint wave of whispers swept across the cabin. The attendant straightened her posture. Sir, she replied, if you do not cooperate, I may have to involve the lead crew. Bruce nodded slowly. That is your choice, he said softly. The tension thickened. A woman near the aisle leaned toward her friend. This is getting awkward, she murmured. A man across the row smirked. Some people don't know when to let things go, he whispered, but Bruce remained still, hands relaxed at his sides, eyes calm, breathing slow. He wasn't trying to challenge anyone, he was simply refusing to shrink. His assistant leaned closer again. They're staring, he whispered. It's not worth it. Bruce turned slightly. It is worth it, he said gently. Because this is not only about me. The attendant returned with another crew member. This one wore a more formal uniform and carried a clipboard. Sir, the new attendant said firmly, we need to verify your seat assignment. Please step into the aisle so we can proceed. The words were professional, but the message was clear. Move. Bruce looked at the empty aisle. He could already imagine how easy it would be to step out, to let the moment pass, to avoid attention, but he didn't. Instead, he calmly held up his boarding pass. This is my seat, he said, and I am not causing any disturbance. The cabin fell quiet. Even the whispers stopped. Every phone was now raised. Someone in the back whispered, Who is this guy? A child 2 rows ahead tugged on her mother's sleeve. Why are they picking on him? She asked quietly. The mother didn't answer. The assistant swallowed nervously. Sir, please? Bruce gave him a reassuring look. I am fine, he said gently. The lead attendant hesitated, clearly unsure how far to push the situation. Time stretched. Seconds felt like minutes. The entire first class cabin was now frozen in anticipation, and that's when Bruce spoke again, not louder, not angrier, but clearer. If I move without a reason, he said calmly, then I am agreeing that I do not belong here. Silence. No one looked away. Even the attendant paused, because those words were not about a seat. They were about dignity. They were about self-respect. They were about every person who had ever been quietly asked to step aside. If you were in Bruce's place, would you stay or move? Type your answer in the comments. Asterisk. The cabin remained frozen. No one spoke. No one moved. Only the quiet hum of the aircraft filled the air. Bruce stood calmly beside his seat, still holding his boarding pass. His posture was relaxed, but the moment felt heavy, like the air itself was waiting for something to happen. Then from 2 rows behind him, a man slowly leaned forward. He squinted at Bruce's face, not in judgment, but in recognition. His eyes widened. He whispered to the woman beside him, Wait. That's Bruce Lee. She frowned. What? She whispered back. That's Bruce Lee, he repeated, louder this time. The martial artist. The actor. The woman leaned into the aisle for a clearer look. Her eyes went wide. Oh my God. It is him. A quiet ripple moved through the cabin. One person leaned to another. A phone lifted. A head turned. Bruce Lee? Someone whispered, "That can't be him." "No, that's definitely him." The whispers spread like a spark catching dry grass. Row by row. Seat by seat. Faces changed, confusion turning into shock. Shock turning into excitement. A young man near the window leaned out. "I grew up watching his movies," he murmured. "That's really him." A woman softly gasped. "He's a legend." Yet Bruce remained still, his eyes calm, his breathing steady. He did not react to the whispers. He did not raise his voice. He did not smile or wave. He simply stood, the original flight attendant, however, had not yet realized what was happening around her. She was still focused on the ticket in her hand. "Sir," she said quietly, "we just need to verify." She stopped mid-sentence. She noticed the change in the cabin, the way people were staring, the way phones were recording, the sudden electricity in the air. She turned her head slightly. "Why is everyone—" she began. A businessman leaned into the aisle. "Do you know who that is?" he asked her. She frowned. "Who?" "That's Bruce Lee," he said. Clearly, her face drained of color. She looked back at Bruce. Then again, then back at the ticket. Her hands trembled slightly, but Bruce said nothing. He didn't announce his name. He didn't correct her. He didn't use fame as a shield. He stood there, quietly, allowing the moment to speak for itself. The cabin buzzed with disbelief. Some passengers smiled. Some shook their heads. Some whispered apologies they weren't brave enough to say out loud. A man murmured, "They almost moved Bruce Lee." Another whispered, "He didn't even say who he was." Phones were now fully raised, and yet Bruce remained humble. He wasn't standing there as a celebrity. He was standing there as a man who simply refused to be quietly displaced. And in that silent, electric moment, the entire mood of the flight began to shift, but the real turning point had not arrived yet. The cabin was no longer just watching. It was listening. Phones were raised. Breaths were held. Every whisper had faded into silence as Bruce Lee slowly straightened his posture and turned slightly toward the aisle. He didn't look angry. He didn't look offended. He looked calm and completely in control. The flight attendant stood frozen, still holding his boarding pass, unsure what to say next. Bruce took a gentle breath and finally spoke, his voice soft, but clear enough for the entire cabin to hear. "I am not upset," he said quietly, "but I would like to say something." No one interrupted him. Even the soft hum of the plane seemed quieter. Bruce placed his hand lightly on the seat beside him. "This seat," he continued, "is not what matters most." Several passengers leaned forward. "What matters is how easily people are judged without a word being spoken." A man near the window slowly lowered his phone. Listening. Bruce turned slightly toward the attendant, not accusingly, not angrily, but with calm honesty. "I'm not asking for special treatment," he said. "I am only asking for the same respect given to everyone else in this cabin." The attendant swallowed nervously. Bruce paused. "In moments like this," he continued, "we discover something important, not about tickets or classes or money, but about character." Silence. A woman gently covered her mouth. Someone in the back whispered, "Wow." Bruce's words were not loud, but they were powerful. "They remind us that dignity does not come from where you sit," he said, "but from how you treat the person standing in front of you." No one moved. No one spoke. His assistant watched him with quiet admiration. Bruce then looked around the cabin. "To everyone here," he said gently, "please remember, we never know the full story of the person beside us." A man nodded. Slowly, a woman wiped her eyes. The flight attendant lowered her eyes. Bruce ended his words with a simple bow of his head. He didn't wait for applause. He didn't demand an apology. He simply stood there, calm, steady, unshaken. And in that moment, the entire cabin felt different, not tense, not awkward, but reflective, because the situation had quietly flipped. The pressure was no longer on Bruce. It was on everyone else. And the final turning point was about to arrive. For a few long seconds after Bruce had finished speaking, no one said a word. The cabin was completely still. Then footsteps echoed down the aisle. The lead flight supervisor had arrived. She was taller, older, and carried herself with quiet authority. She had clearly sensed that something serious was happening. "Is there a problem here?" she asked firmly. The original attendant turned quickly, her face pale. "Yes, there was a concern about a seating assignment," she said, her voice slightly shaky. The supervisor gently took the boarding pass from her hand and scanned it once. Then she scanned it again. Her eyebrows lifted. Her expression changed. She slowly looked up at Bruce. And in that moment, she recognized him. Her eyes widened, not in fear, but in deep realization. "Sir," she said softly. "Mr. Lee." A quiet gasp moved through the cabin. The supervisor straightened her posture. "This seat is correctly assigned to you," she said clearly. "And you are absolutely in the right place." The words echoed like a release of pressure. The original attendant froze. Her face flushed red. She took a slow step back. The supervisor then turned to Bruce. "I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience and the discomfort caused to you," she said, bowing her head slightly. "This does not reflect our values, and we take responsibility." Bruce nodded gently. He did not smile in victory. He did not raise his chin. He simply said, "Thank you." And that single word said everything. The cabin broke into applause. Soft at first, then louder. Strangers smiled at him. Some nodded in respect. Others whispered apologies under their breath. The assistant exhaled in relief. The original attendant stood quietly, shaken, realizing the weight of what had just happened. Bruce slowly sat down in his seat. He didn't look proud. He looked peaceful. He adjusted his jacket, fastened his seatbelt, and rested his hands calmly on his lap. The applause slowly faded, but the energy in the cabin had completely changed. It was no longer awkward. It was inspired. And then Bruce did something no one expected. He looked toward the original attendant and said gently, "Please don't feel ashamed. We all learn. What matters is that we choose to be better." Her eyes filled with tears. She nodded silently. Have you ever seen someone win a difficult moment without raising their voice? Share your thoughts in the comments. The cabin returned to quiet, but no one forgot what they had just witnessed. Because they didn't just see a seat dispute, they saw a lesson. And the final ripple was about to go global. By the time the plane landed, the story had already left the cabin. What began as a quiet misunderstanding had turned into a moment the internet would never forget. Several passengers had uploaded short clips while still in the air. By the time phones connected to signal on the runway, notifications began exploding. Messages poured in. Screens lit up. Videos spread across timelines, group chats, and news feeds. People weren't sharing it because of drama. They were sharing it because of the message. A man who refused to be quietly judged. A moment of calm strength. A reminder that dignity doesn't need noise to be powerful. Within hours, millions had seen the clips. Comments flooded in. Real strength is calm. This is what respect looks like. He didn't raise his voice, but he raised everyone's standards. We need more moments like this. News outlets picked up the story. Blogs wrote about it. Influencers reposted it with captions about humility, respect, and equality. But Bruce Lee? He said nothing. No interviews. No posts. No statements. He quietly walked through the terminal, thanked the crew, and left. That silence made his message even louder, because he didn't need to explain his character. He had already shown it. Days later, a short quote appeared on a fan page. Character speaks louder than status. Those words went viral too. People began using them as captions. Posters were made. Classroom teachers shared the story with students. Parents talked about it at dinner tables, not because it was about a celebrity, but because it was about how to treat another human being, and somewhere in the world, someone who had almost stepped aside decided to stand tall instead. Someone who was about to judge chose kindness instead, and someone who felt invisible finally felt seen. Because one calm moment on a plane reminded millions of something powerful. Respect changes everything. If you believe no one should ever be judged by appearance, type respect in the comments and subscribe for more powerful, True style stories that inspire strength, dignity, and humanity.